Ebrahim, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Thank you, Tom, for inviting me for this discussion. I am Ebrahim Azadegan, an Iranian philosopher. My BS degree was in engineering, and also my MS degree in physics, and I have PhD in analytic philosophy. My PhD thesis was on the problem of divine hiddenness in analytic philosophy of religion. And from 2010 until now, I am a professor of philosophy of science and religion in Sharif University of Technology, Department of Philosophy of Science. And about 4 years ago until now, I am the head of department.
Cool. And I think the topic today was fine-tuning and the problem of evil. Could you tell me what your position is on the fine-tuning argument?
Fine-tuning argument. Yeah. The position is that, as you know, there are lots of evidence that the universe we live in is designed so perfectly in a detailed manner that we human beings can live in the earth, and we each other can talk together now. There are many physical parameters that even small changes in them could disastrously lead to extinction of human being in the world, and our carbonic living in the earth could not happen. For example, the constant of gravity, the constant of the nuclear absorption between protons and neutrons, and the nuclear absorption between proton and electron. Each constant, if there would be any small change in them, our physical universe would so differently change that we could not be here. So it seems that the physical evidence that physicists nowadays have discovered is a support for the traditional design argument that there is a perfect design for what happened in the universe and what we see in the universe. But my concern about this argument is that we have a problem of evil in the world as long as we have looked at perfect fine-tuning, because we can ask, okay, the word is fine-tuned very well, but why the fine-tuner of the word does not enough fine-tune the word so that the evil in the word be much less than what it is now. So I think that as long as we emphasize on the powerfulness of the design argument and the fine-tuning argument in favor of God's existence, we push the problem of evil to be more and more grateful and more powerful. This is my concern.
So my first question would be Why would the fact that if the constants could change even slightly, life wouldn't be possible? Why would that indicate that anything was fine-tuned by a god? For example, like if we imagine each possible variation, like if the gravitational force was increased by one or whatever, or decreased by one, we could imagine there's a possible God who could want each of those variations. So there's a God who could want our current variation, a God who could want gravity plus one, and a God who could want gravity minus one. And so for each of the variations, there's a God who could want that variation. And so it seems like God is equally as fine tuned to create a universe for life as the universe is fine tuned for life. And so if the universe needs to be fine tuned, then it seems so does God.
Since the God of Abrahamic religions are not just the creator of the world or multiverse, God has intention and pursues his intentions in the world. Uh, the God that created the world that created by God has telos and should have telos. Without looking at the word from teleological point of view, we can say that okay, every word can be created by God, but the point is that when we see that many parameters are matched together, and after that we see that something like human being is aware of himself and is aware of the fact that these parameters are designed in the world for him or her to exist in the world. I mean that we have the consciousness that the world is designed so that we can have consciousness in the world, or higher level consciousness about our existence and the design that happened in the world. This fact should be explained. It requires some sort of explanation, and this is not an easy fact that we can ignore it. I think the best explanation for this fact is that someone has intention to produce such a word, and that one cannot be human being, of course, because we have not enough power to create such a word. And the best explanation for this fact that we encounter in the world is, I think, something like the God of Abraham or other religions.
Well, so my argument is more there are lots of different ways the universe could be, and most of them would not allow for life. But there's also different ways God could be. God may want a universe of nothing but black holes. God may want a universe of nothing but hydrogen atoms. God may want a universe of nothing but moons. And so there's each way the universe could be that doesn't have life. There could also be a God who could want that universe and not this one. And so it seems like the God who exists had to have been finely tuned to be a way to prefer life versus not life.
Sorry,
That's all right. Yeah,
I should.
just give it a minute. Yeah, your internet connection is going in and out. That's not good.
Okay. I'm sorry that somebody calls me and the internet of my providers was off. Would you please
All
repeat
right,
your
no
question?
problem.
Sorry.
Yeah. So my argument is that the universe is fine-tuned because there are many, many ways it could be that would not
Oh,
allow for life. It'd be
yeah,
like black holes, nothing but black holes, nothing but hydrogen atoms, whatever.
yeah.
But the same
I
thing
understand.
applies to God. Like there could be many different ways God could be. Maybe he only wants a world of black holes or moons or hydrogen atoms. And so just as much as the universe is fine-tuned, God must also be fine-tuned to want life. Because if he doesn't want life, then he would produce a universe of just black holes or whatever. And so it seems like God is just as fine-tuned as the universe is. And so if you're saying that the level of detail in the fine-tuning is indicated that it must be designed by a mind, well, then it seems like God also must be designed by a mind, bigger mind.
Yeah, there's a good example that I I think Anthony Carey is the one that say this example. It is the example of the quad, fire quad. Perhaps you heard it. Um, for the example is goes like this. Consider that four people are trying to kill you by their guns. They all of them shoot at you, but after their shooting, you still be alive. Uh, this shows that you can ask a question about why I am still alive. And this question requires explanation. My idea is that there could be lots of universes with multiple different variables, constants, and g minus 1, g plus 1, and perhaps God was the creator of that world. It's not my concern. My concern is that why I, myself, can talk with you here and now, why I am exist in this world, and why this universe is exist. This universe is strongly and heavily is astonishing. It's a strange situation that we live in this universe. There are uh, lots of parameters should have been modified and should have been designed, and to the extent that we can talk now today with each other. So my question concerned that um, that this unique universe that we live in is requires explanation, and I think that the best explanation for this fact is God of Abraham, or who has intention.
So let me just agree with that for the sake of the argument and say if the best explanation for our universe, because of how complicated it is a God, well, God is just as complicated. So God needs an explanation. God must have been created by a bigger mind who fine tuned God because there's God must have been fine tuned to design this universe as opposed to a different one. Why did he create a universe designed for life instead of a universe designed for unicorns or for black holes? So the argument is that if you see our universe requires a designer, then God must also require a designer because he is equally as detailed as the universe.
Uh, okay, but it can be infinitely go to high levels, and I understand your argument. But I think that the, if the God of Abraham is infinitely wise and infinitely powerful, then if the divine attributes can be ascribed to a person like the God of Abraham, then, and he eternally lived and is omnipotent and omniscient, then we can stop at him. So I understand, but the divine attributes, if they are infinitely perfect, then is a solution to the infinite regress that you say.
Well,
Because
I don't.
infinitely powerful, omnipotent, or omniscient do not need another one to help him.
Well, couldn't we say the same thing about the universe? We could just say that
Mm.
the universe is infinitely powerful and eternal, and so even though it's finely tuned, it doesn't need an explanation for why it's finely tuned. So we could
Yeah,
say,
you can say this to about the universe. I know, but it is very difficult to ascribe omnipotence, omniscience to universe. It is you can say this, but how you can prove this? That the universe is omniscient? Hmm. It has intention. Universe has intention. Oh, yeah. It's up to you.
well, I don't think it's omniscient. I just think it's omnipotent. But how can you prove it's God is omnipotent? Like it seems like it's equally as hard to prove the universe is omnipotent as it is to prove God is omnipotent. It seems to be just something that we're asserting.
Uh, please look at our dialogue. We start with the fact that we live in this universe and we can talk with each other. This is the fact. There are lots of parameters that it seems to us that design that if one of them can change minusly, there would not be me and you to talk with each other. So to explain this fact, we need an intention. We think that an intention, a person with intention and enough power and enough science should be existed to create this world. But if you have other explanation for this fact that requires explanation, I'm here. I'm ready to hear you.
Well, I think that if you're saying that our universe is very complicated, and if it was different in any way, we wouldn't be alive. Therefore, it was finely tuned. It seems like, well, the exact same thing applies to God. And your solution to say, well, because God has the omni properties, therefore he doesn't need to be finely tuned. Well, we could just apply the omni properties to the universe. And so it seems like all of your arguments and the solutions that you apply to God also work for the universe itself. And so I'm not seeing why we would need a God in the first place, because we could just say the universe is omnipotent and eternal. And so its nature is fundamental, just like you think
Yeah,
God's nature is
I have
fundamental.
no problem with this idea that God and the universe are together. And my theology is open to this, that God is transcendent from universe, but embedded in the universe. So if you want to ascribe divine attributes to universe, I have no problem with that. But I think there should be some intention, some great intention, and some great consciousness alive in the world. And if you think that the whole universe has consciousness and intention and science and is mighty, and I have no problem with that, because God is not out of universe. God is in universe and also is transcendent.
Well,
in my opinion.
I don't think the universe is conscious. I think it's just a quantum field, so there's no mind there. I just think it is all powerful and necessary in that it's the fundamental nature of reality. But it seemed like your argument was because the universe is so complex, it requires a mind. But if that was the case, then God's mind was God's nature determined by a consciousness, or was God's nature existing without being determined by a consciousness?
God's nature is determined by consciousness and intention. And
How
if
can God's nature be determined by conscious? Because if God's nature is determined, that means there has to be a different consciousness to determine God's nature, right?
no, because the because God is alive, eternally alive, and has consciousness about himself, and this consciousness about himself, or to repeat Aristotle's term, self-contemplation, is the work that every day God is engaged in self-contemplation. And the process of self-contemplation in God results the creation of the universe.
Well, but does the self-contemplation of God decide his own nature? So, like, what came first, God's consciousness or God's nature? Because if God's consciousness came first, then his nature is arbitrary. There's nothing to determine it. If his nature came first, then his consciousness must be determined by his nature, not the other way around. So it seems like it's impossible for a person, a being, to determine their own nature, because in order to determine your own nature, you need to already have desires and things to make
Mhm.
choices. And so it doesn't seem like there's a way for God to decide what his nature would be unless he already had a nature causing him to make the decisions in the first place.
It's a very difficult question about the nature of God, but my idea is that, like Schelling, that that God is God is no or nothing, just nothing other than a consciousness in the first place. But this self-consciousness of God is the starting point that God as know, as God as know is uh, something that we just exist as a conscious being that do not manifest himself for others. But when God as know manifest himself, then the creation becomes manifested and start, and the existence we can talk about existing creatures. So the process is like that. There is nothing in the one horn, and there is everything in the another horn, and there is a process from nothing to everything. This is that relation in all of the process happens in God. So everything that exists is a sign of God's manifestation and not God himself. And really we cannot say about God himself, because God is as no. God as no, we cannot talk about him.
Well, can't we just say the same thing about the universe? The universe's nature is also as mysterious, and the fact that it has a fundamental reality to it is what causes the fine tuning of all the physics, just like
Yeah, yeah.
we
You
understand it
can
as
say
God.
you can say this about the universe if the universe and God are the same one, and God is embedded in the universe, and I accept this, but also God is transcendent, but embedded in the universe. But my problem is that if you have talk about fine tuning in the word, if you have talked about teleology, if you have about the purpose, you need intention, a person with intention behind that. I think that teleology and purposefulness and intentionality are hand in hand. So if you want to explain the fact that we live in the world now and we can talk with each other now, in here and now, this very difficult fact, this very strange fact, requires explanation. That the best explanation for this is a person who intends this to happen.
Why couldn't it be an emergent property? Because it seems like there's lots of things in the universe that aren't fundamental. For example, stars aren't fundamental, and so we don't think that that God is a star, right? It seems like there are lots of things that come about in the universe that are a result of other more base fundamental things. And it seems like consciousness and intention are a result of brains, which are a result of biology, which are a result of chemistry, physics, etc. And so it doesn't seem like intention needs to be a part of the fundamental nature of reality. It can be an emergent property of physics from brains.
Yeah, many philosophers say about that when the system is complex enough, then um, perhaps consciousness can emerge from this complex system of neurons. Um, it is very difficult for me to accept this argument because emergent is a mistress problem, mistress strategy, and when the physical atoms do not have consciousness in themselves, how a property like consciousness can emerge from combination of them? It seems to me not possible. And this intuition is not for me, but many philosophers or even naturalist philosophers have this same intuition.
Well, sure, but does the fact that we can't imagine how it's done mean it must be another fundamental essence? Because it seems like there's certain times in human history where we could imagine things or couldn't imagine how things were done, and we thought they were fundamental essences, like lightning. We couldn't imagine how it was done. We thought Zeus did it, and then after we understood more about the physical world, we could then explain it, and then explaining it as being caused by a mind or some kind went away. And so the same thing I think is going to happen with consciousness is that as we understand more about the brain and consciousness and create artificial intelligence, we'll be able to do it in future. So why say that because we can't imagine how it's done now, that means it will never be able to be explained in the future?
Let us distinguish between two types of consciousness. The consciousness that we can ascribe to artificial intelligence, and that they are conscious because or on the basis of a designer who designed them to be conscious. They are not conscious in themselves, but they are like a calculator. We can program them to be conscious, but our consciousness is in our nature and is completely different from their, because we are we have self-consciousness of ourselves, and but they do not have self-consciousness of themselves.
I think in the future they will. I think that as we make progress with technology, eventually we'll be able to make consciousness in computers just like it's in people. And so I think that as we make progress in learning more about consciousness, we'll be able to understand how it comes about in the brain. So I think that we'll be able to learn more than we know now. So the fact that we don't know how it works now doesn't seem to tell us anything about the future. It doesn't seem to mean that we'll never be able to know how it works. And so the conclusion that because we can't imagine how consciousness works, therefore it must be
Yeah,
fundamental.
yeah, I understand. But this argument does not against the existence of God, because this argument only shows that the material being can, in future, have thought, have thinking, have recognition, have consciousness. Okay, and the artificial intelligence has a designer like me. So if I have consciousness and I am a physical thing in the world, no problem. This argument only shows that the physical thing can think. But if physical thing can think, it has another designer. I have another designer also. So it does not refute the existence of a designer for intelligence.
All right. So the argument isn't to say there isn't a God. The argument is to say that we could understand more about consciousness, and consciousness could still be a result of matter. And so we don't need it to be fundamental to the universe.
Yeah, if you are right, and for the sake of argument, we accept this, that the computer can think, no problem. It just say that the material beings can think. Okay, and if I am a material being, I also have. I conclude that in the material beings there is some sort of consciousness in the material beings. I can conclude that.
Yes, I mean I agree we're conscious, but the question is do we need consciousness to be at the fundamental nature of reality, or can consciousness be like pineapples, a result of biology? And so I think it's reasonable to conclude that consciousness can be a result of biology based on all the evidence we have. I don't think there's any evidence that consciousness exists outside of brains. Seems like all the evidence is that, like, if we cut the corpus callosum in the brain, then our consciousness splits into multiple consciousnesses. And so it's likely that consciousness is a result of physical parts of the brain. And I don't see any reason to think that consciousness is a result of fundamental physics, or like at the level of fundamental physics, any more than we have reason to think that pineapples are at the level of fundamental physics. That doesn't seems like it's a result of other things. It's not a base thing itself.
I'm not sure that in the future we can reach this conclusion that computers can think essentially as human beings. But for the sake of our argument, if we accept this, I can say that in the material beings and the universe have the teleology to the point that, as Tom Nagel, for example, says, have the theology to the point that we reach to this complicated systems that have consciousness. But this teleology in the universe that reach this point that we live, and the supercomputer with intelligence live, has teleology, and this teleology requires, as I think, um, requires a bigger plan behind that. So if God is embedded in the world, you can explain better what happened in the world, that the complex system, even with emergence, reached the complex systems of with consciousness.
Why would that explain it better?
Because our world reached to this point, and it seems that this world has tell us to this point, because not even the four constant of physics, but lots of parameters, and in the sky, in our Earth, join together that will reach to this point, and that we have consciousness and we can create material computers with material beings that have consciousness. So this fact, I think that we now the universe reached now requires some explanation, and the explanation is God. But I think that if we look to the world from teleological point of view, we can accept my view that the world requires some designer. If we are the result of the world, but you can say that no, that the world is, we are not the result of a process of evolution, but we just pop up in the world by chance. This is another view.
Yeah,
but
so
I
it
don't think,
seems,
yeah, you know, every faculty that we have, even our biological faculty, even the faculty that we have, language, requires explanation. It is not easy that we have language. For example, you can look at chimpanzee and the Homo sapiens. The difference between them, to have the faculty of language is not and is not happened by chance, as I think, because lots of changes, lots and lots of changes, more than 30 important changes in our brain, in our chest, in our mouth should be changed that to have language. So between chimpanzee and human being and Homo sapiens, I mean, so this I think that these changes is not happened by chance.
well, I'm not seeing how saying that consciousness is comes from a god would be better than there is no consciousness in nature, in the universe, but the consciousness is a result of physics because language is complicated. Like, I think that obviously there's lots of very complicated things in the universe, but to say that because it's complicated, it requires a more complicated mind seems to just cause the problem to be more complicated than it was before. You just said, no, it's just a part of the universe. So I think that solving a problem with a bigger problem isn't a better solution than saying it's a result of physical forces that we know about.
It is not a solving problem with a bigger problem. It is to say another model of explanation. For example, you take a glass of water. You can explain it in physics. Very difficult to explain it in physics. And lots of atoms in your hand and in the air and the glass. You have to write the formula for it to explain it. What happened in the physical world? What another sort of explanation, and by personal explanation, I can more easily explain what happened in the world. What happened in the world is I am thirsty and I take a glass of water. And this personal explanation is what happened when we see the complexity in the world, that the complex systems like a human being lives in the world, and lots of parameters supports this existence. We have another sort of explanation. We provide another sort of explanation by personal explanation.
Well, I don't see how a personal explanation tells us the mechanism by which it was formed. It just tells us a motivation. So a personal explanation is a motivation that somebody has to do something. It doesn't tell us how it's done. It's just saying they would want to do something if they had some kind of power to do it. But it doesn't tell us how it was done any more than saying it was done by physics. We could say that there's some law in physics that does it, and we would have equally as much an explanation. It's just some kind of motivation.
Yeah, you're right. We have two sorts of questions: the why question and how question. And the question about why the universe is fine-tuned is answered by the existence of God. But how the question is fine-tuned should answered by physics. But the question of why is important for philosophers and philosophers of religion and science, because and we should not ignore this sort of question. In modern science, we normally ignore the why questions and only pay attention to how questions. But why questions, I think, is very important to have an overview of the world, that what happened in the world.
Well, it seems like why questions don't do anything. It seems like you can ask a why for anything, even if there isn't one. So why did the tornado form? Well, maybe there was no reason why, it just happened because of physics. And so it seems like asking a why question is redundant. You can ask why questions when there is no why question to ask.
I don't think so, that this is the redundant or the tautology to ask why question. Why question is more important than how question. You know, why you think that the nature is so important that we should pay our full attention to how questions? I think that the nature is something nearly fake. You know what? When you look at atoms, what is atom? When you look at the basic materials that create the nature, that we every day look at this and pay our full attention to this, and we take our whole life to read about the how questions about nature, we lose our time. Contrary your idea. What important, because nature is not so important thing for thinking. What is more important thing for thinking is why we human being lives in the world. And when we think about this, then we should think about what is our role in the world. like a theater. We have some role in the world. We have some small time that we can show ourselves. So I think that we have uh, and every human being have a special role in the world. That by why question we can concern about that, and we have time to think about that. And I'm not disagree with so many department of mechanics, physics, engineering, and uh, studying nature. They're working their work good. Okay, no problem. And the result is many technologies and okay, but what is important for us as human being is to think about why question. Why I'm here? Why am I alive? Why I'm here in the world? What is my role in the world? And so how I can communicate with each other, with other people, how I can have moral life, and how can I influence to my society. And this is important. These were important questions, not how questions. This is my
Well,
doubt.
in the case of reality, we have to first say that, or first demonstrate that why questions give correct solutions. Like we can ask, why did the rock fall off the mountain? Well, there isn't a why. There, it's just a how. It's a how it
No.
fell because of gravity. And so we can ask why to anything, but there's not always uh, an answer. And sometimes you ask the question and it's just it doesn't apply. Why did the river flow down the valley? There is no why. It's a how. It's a gravity. And so if you're asking why for anything in physics, that may not be the appropriate question to ask because there may be no why. Not everything needs a why. Why is something that applies to intentionality, but to ask why in the case of like gravity, why is gravity? It's begging the question because it may not have a why. It may just have a how.
Yes, you're right. And in physical uh, events, we should ask about how. And so many people in the world are engaged with how questions. But why questions is important for philosophers? Why questions is important for theologians, for uh, in human sciences? Why questions is important for psychologists? Uh, for me, why question is important because it's more important than any how question. As I told you that I have degree in physics and engineering, but I left them aside because for me, why question is very, very important. Mm, it it relates to my existence. When I ask why I am here in the world, then uh, I should answer it by engaging my whole existence and my relation to people and how to manage this. So, as a human being, I think why question is important for us, for every of us to think about this more and more every day.
Well, I think it's fine to think about it, but I don't think asking a why question is evidence of a mind. So, because why questions are not demonstrated to have an answer always. The fact that you can ask a why question doesn't always mean there's an answer. And so, asking a why question isn't evidence of a God. You can think about it and think it might be interesting, but it wouldn't be evidence.
What is evidence is that the fact that I can ask why question. This fact that I and you can ask why questions is the evidence that there is some designed and purpose for uh, the evolution of this sort of mindful person, that he or she can ask this question of himself or herself, that why I am exist. Um, Look at the example that I said earlier about the quiet fire. Uh, After shooting, when the person be alive, he or she can ask herself or himself or herself that why I am alive. And we are after shooting here now and in this world. There are lots of uh, attacks in us to, and if every one of these attacks can be successful, then we would not be here. And so I'm now after these shootings, that many shootings. For example, mm, there are lots of stones come from the sky toward our Earth every moment. That there's some planets in our environment that observe them. So we can really ask this question, that why I am here, and this why question can be answered, as I think, by teleology that supports God's hypothesis.
I think that's begging the question. I think it's begging the question to say that because you can ask why, that means consciousness or intentionality must be fundamental. I think that until we actually have solved consciousness, then we can't say one way or the other what it is fundamentally, and we have to go based off of our best evidence, which seems to be neurology. I did want to talk about the problem of evil a little bit. How do you tie in fine tuning to the problem of evil to
Yeah,
make it better or worse?
yeah. As I said, I think that the problem of evil is hand to hand in the fine-tuning argument. As a theist, push the fine-tuning argument forward. The problem of evil comes to his face because and become stronger, because when we say that the world is fully fine-tuned by benevolence God as the designer of the world, then an atheist can say that why there is so many evil, so many suffering in the world, and why the omniscient and omnipotent God doesn't enough fine-tune the world, that the amount of evil in the world become lower. And so the ancient problem of evil is, I think, hand in hand with the ancient argument from design. This is my idea about the relation between these two arguments.
So you're saying that because he fine-tuned it so detailedly, he could have fine-tuned it more so to get rid of extra suffering, something like that.
Yeah. So the problem of evil is the argument against the existence of God. Fine-tuning argument is the argument for the existence of God. And I think that there is a paradox here. If the argument from the fine-tuning is successful, then the contra argument, or the argument from the evil, is also successful. So there is a paradox here, I think.
That's interesting. Why do you think that typical arguments like he needed to create suffering to allow for free will or something?
Mm. Um, the theodicy, like mm, he permits evil in the world to um, because human beings have free will, and without that evil, there would not be a world with free will, or some other theodicies. I think not answered this big question, because if an atheist can ask that God could create a world with free will, but the natural evils in the world becomes lower or lesser than what is here in the world. Um, the theodicy of free will only can support them, or can have answer to moral evils that human beings have done, but not an answer to the natural evils like earthquakes and many other natural evils. So it's a moment I want to have add power to my mobile phone. Just a moment.
All right.
Okay. Storage is ready. Let's charge it. Okay. We
All
can
right.
continue.
So do you think that that indicates that God doesn't exist or that God's evil? Because if the universe is fine-tuned, then he must have allowed deliberately all the natural
Um,
evils.
yeah, my answer to this paradox is to some extent complicated, and but my answer is that the fine-tuning argument starts with the premise that the world is fine-tuned for human being to live in. My idea is that we can change this anthropomorphism into anthrocentric presupposition, and this and we should see the world from God's eye. I think that the world is fine-tuned for not for human being, but for God Himself to manifest His mercy and benevolence toward human beings. So, yeah, the evil exists in the world because God has sympathy and empathy with the suffered human being, and with every human being that have pain. God understands our suffering and pains. God suffers as long as we suffer, and so uh, he shows his highest empathy with the sufferer. I think, but by this changing the point of view, we can, I think, solve the problem, the paradox of the problem of evil and fine tuning. The word is fine tuned for God to manifest his empathy with sufferers.
Well, why would God also suffering make it better? It seems like that just makes it worse.
Uh, um, it's better because God manifests his special mercy with the sufferers. Mm, for example, you have a child that is playing. You have some attention to him, but as long as he was in pain, for example, his hand, but for example, is bloody or something like during the play, you have special attention to him. This is the like of the ship example in the Bible, that Jesus pay pay attention to uh, the ship that is out of the other ships, and goes toward them to find that one. So I think that special God's mercy is being manifested to his empathy with the sufferers.
Gotcha. Well, we've been going for about an hour. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find more about your work?
Yeah, I have a published paper in this area in Hythrop Journal. The title of the paper is "Evil in a Fine-Tuned World."
Cool. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a
I
wonderful rest of
appreciate
your day.
Thank you very much for this good conversation and your fairness. Thank you. I find you very fair. Thank you. Bye.
Appreciate it.